Hi guys, in today's video, I'm going to be talking about seitan. I'm going to try to cover everything that you need to know about seitan, from what it is to what the origin is, who eats it, why make it, different cooking methods, storage, seasoning, and everything else in between. Make sure to check out the chapters if you want to go straight into the recipes or if there's anything specific that you want to jump into. But first, let's talk about what seitan is. Seitan is basically a plant-based protein. It's made out of gluten, the main ingredient, which is found in wheat. Essentially, it's wheat gluten, and there are different cooking methods to making it. It's been around for like centuries. It originates in like China and Japan, so East Asia, and it's been around for centuries. A lot of the Buddhist monks used to make it as one of their sources of protein. So they were either vegetarian or didn't eat meat. It's a high source of protein. It's about 70 to 80% of protein compared to like chicken, depending on the cooking method that is used to make it. So who basically eats it or why make it? You've got vegetarians, vegans, plant-based people, people that are avoiding meat for whatever reason, whether it's health reasons or cholesterol or whatnot. This is suitable for those people, or people who simply want to add a plant-based protein alternative to their diet would enjoy this seitan. What's amazing about seitan is that it's extremely versatile. First of all, it's cheap to make at home. It is easy to make at home. It is high in protein, so you can use it to mimic chicken, meat, steaks. You can add them to sandwiches, stir fries, curries. It's extremely versatile depending on how you season it, how you cook it. So that's just a brief about seitan. I hope I've given you a bit of context to what it is and why make it and what are some of the benefits from it and what to expect. What kind of exact flavor and texture you will get will depend on the preparation, the seasoning, the preparation, and the cooking method that you use. Basically, you need to choose it according to what you're trying to achieve. In this video, I'm going to actually show you two methods of making seitan. And the reason is because there are different pros and cons to the different methods, which I'll talk you through during the recipes. One is easier than the other. One is the more traditional method, and so on. Let's get started. So for the first method, we're going to be using flour. This is the more traditional way of making seitan, but it's a longer process and it's messier. And then I'm going to show you a simpler, quicker method in the second part of the video. This is about 1 kilo of flour. This is all-purpose flour. You can use whole wheat flour, you can use bread flour. I'm going to use all-purpose flour because it has a higher content of gluten compared to whole wheat flour. It'll be easier to work with than whole wheat flour, but whole wheat flour has more nutrients and more fiber, so it has a better nutritional profile. Okay, and I'm going to add a pinch of salt. So we're going to add the water. Move it to a surface, countertop. We'll need to knead it for about 10 minutes or so. So it seems too wet, so I need to add more flour to it. Okay, now that it's ready, we're gonna add water to it, cold water, and we're gonna submerge it in cold water. So we're gonna cover and let it sit for about an hour or two, or even overnight, and then continue. So while the dough is resting, we're gonna prepare our broth and bring it to a simmer. What we're gonna start with is our vegetable broth. You can buy ready-made broth, or you can prepare at home by using water. So I'm gonna add my water. Okay, about 6 cups of water. And then I'm gonna add my homemade vegetable stock paste, which I'm gonna link in the description. You can use your cubes, the vegetable stock cubes, the ready-made ones, to dissolve in your water to make your broth. Then we're gonna also add coconut aminos. You can use soy sauce instead. Coconut aminos are like, I think about 70% less salty than soy sauce. So if you are using one or the other, keep in mind how salty they are, and that way you can adjust the rest of your ingredients accordingly, so it's not overtly salted. So I'm going to use that, and it's a bit sweeter. Okay, white miso paste, that's also a bit salty, so please keep that in mind. And we've got our white pepper, apple cider vinegar, bay leaf, and then I'm also going to add celery, chopped celery, and leek. Okay, just give it a bit of a mix. So I'm going to add it to the stovetop and on high heat to simmer, and then cook my seitan. Okay, now that the dough has rested for about an hour or two, you can even let it rest overnight. We're gonna dump out the water and we're gonna add fresh water, press it down multiple times, just keep playing with it for several minutes. The water will get very cloudy. We're gonna dump that water and repeat that process for several times until the water starts to become clearer. It doesn't need to fully become clear, but you will see that it will gradually start to become more clear. And that's when we will be ready to use it. The best thing to do for this step is to do it in the sink, using the sink, where you can dump the water, add fresh water, clean it, like press it for several minutes, dump the water, and repeat that process several times. But because we're doing this video, I'm gonna actually just show you on camera what I'm gonna do. Dump out the water. We're left with this dough, okay? I'm gonna add fresh water and then I'm gonna start pressing it, okay? And we're gonna start just pressing it down, just playing with it for several minutes to help release some of the starch and so that we're left with most of the gluten. As you can see, the water is super cloudy. You can actually preserve this water and make something else with it. I've ended up with a very cloudy water. So we're gonna dump that water out. We're gonna add fresh water again, and we're gonna repeat the step a few times. The water is again gonna become quite cloudy. This is super therapeutic, guys. Like, I can't tell you how nice it actually feels to do this. As you can see, it's a much messier method. You can even use a strainer if you like. We're gonna keep repeating this method for a few more times. As you can see now, this is like the fifth time we do this. The water is not as cloudy as the other previous rounds. The dough is coming together, it's holding, so I think we're almost good to go. Okay, and so for the last time, I have used a colander and I'm just gonna squeeze out the liquid. So I'm just gonna let it strain for a bit and then we can use it. You remember how the size of the dough that we started with, how massive it was? And look at what we've landed with. So we can cut it into 4 pieces and add it to our broth to simmer, or we can try to prepare it into a knot. So I'm gonna try to show you how we do that, just to show you the different ways of doing it, okay? Just to show you what the method is, but really you can just cut it into 4 different pieces, or smaller strips if you even want, and then just simmer it that way. I'm showing you how to braid it. Be careful not to, okay, and then into the knot. So you can prepare a knot, like you can braid it and create a knot like that and boil it that way. I've heated the broth, brought it to a boil, but now I'm gonna reduce the temperature, the heat, to bring it to a simmer. I've prepared my seitan. I'm gonna dump it into the broth and I'm gonna simmer it for about an hour to an hour and a half until all the flavors have been absorbed and it's ready. Okay, and now we have got our seitan ready. Here we have it. So you take it out and allow it to rest before you follow the next step. So next you can slice it, you can pull out the pieces, you can cut it into cubes, you can keep it as whole and roast it, you can marinate it before to the next step, or because it's also been simmered in broth and a lot of flavor, then already it has a good base of a flavor that can be enjoyed as is. What's really worth mentioning, and you can see here, it's very kind of soft and very tender, really mimicking chicken or meat. Let's try it. Really beautiful, very soft, it's very interesting. What's good is that it does have a base of flavor, like a halloumi cheese, like a very soft, chewy texture. Okay, now on cooking method number 2. We're going to be making seitan using vital wheat gluten. This is a much easier, simpler method, significantly easier. A few things worth mentioning is that the vital wheat gluten is basically processed. So it's already have the high concentrate of the gluten intact, and we are just going to quickly make it, versus the flour where we have to knead it for longer, prepare it, let it sit, wash it out, and so on. So this is a much easier and quicker method. Vital wheat gluten is probably a more expensive ingredient than flour. I would assume if you're looking for a much easier and faster method, then definitely the vital wheat gluten is the way to go. We've got our vital wheat gluten, and we've got some chickpea flour, and then we've got our water, okay? And we're gonna add a pinch of salt. Now for this method, I'm gonna add some of the seasoning and the nutritional yeast to the actual dough so that it retains the flavor. And then we're gonna add some of the other ingredients to the broth. You don't have to do that. What you actually need to use for the seitan is just that, the chickpea flour and the water, that's it. Vital wheat gluten, we've got our chickpea flour. I'm gonna add some salt here. Not too much, because also we've got our broth, so I would rather not over salt, just a pinch of salt, and then later on we can check the broth and then adjust accordingly. This is optional. Garlic powder and our onion powder here, okay? Nutritional yeast as well here. Mix it until a dough form, and then we're gonna knead it for about 5 minutes. We're gonna transfer it to here. We're gonna knead it. It's a bit more yellow because I added the nutritional yeast to it, but you don't have to do that. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna cut it into pieces. Again, you can shape it in any way that you like, but what we're gonna do in this method is we're just gonna cut it into pieces, and then we're gonna cook it in the broth. So now let's make a broth. So you can add vegetable broth or water and dilute it in the water to make your broth. Coconut aminos. You can also use soy sauce instead. White miso paste. Apple cider vinegar. Celery, you can also add leek in there, or bay leaves. Add it to the stovetop on high heat and bring it to a simmer. So I heated my broth, and I'm gonna drop in my seitan and simmer until cooked. So now we've got our seitan ready. Let me show you what it looks like. And you're just gonna put it out to cool down. And then once it's cooled down, we can prepare it in any shape that we want. We can slice it, we can pull it out to get strips, or we can keep it as a whole piece and roast it. I'm gonna now show you the different shapes. So you can keep it whole and roast it. You can cut it into slices, you can rip it out, shred it, or you could cut it into cubes that you can add into a salad, for example. If you also want to, for example, now saute it, so with a bit of oil, or adding it to stir fries, to curries, it's your pick. But what I would say is with the seitan, you have to figure out what kind of seasoning and flavor you like. Otherwise, it's quite bland, depending on what you like in terms of seasoning and depending on which recipe you're using it in. We're gonna try it. Let's see. It's got a bit of the chickpea flour kind of aftertaste. It does have a flavor. It's not bland. Okay, so now I'm going to compare the two methods, highlight a few of the pros and cons or things worth mentioning. In terms of accessibility, flour is more accessible than vital wheat gluten in terms of ingredients. In terms of preparation time, that takes a lot more time to prepare. This is super easy to prepare. So this requires more washing time and preparation, and you need to first let it rest for an hour, and then you need to wash it several times, while this one is just a matter of mixing the ingredients and letting it rest for 5 minutes. In terms of prep time, this one is much faster for sure, and the cooking time would be the same. In terms of messiness, super messy. It'll be less messy if you make it using the sink when you're washing it out, for sure, but I did it on the countertop to demonstrate it. Still, it will be a lot messier than this method. This method is just literally mixing the ingredients. In terms of texture control, this will give you probably a less consistent texture just because of how long you knead the dough and how long you wash it. You're probably not gonna get super consistent outcome every single time. And I noticed as well that the top and the bottom is different. So the bottom seems to be a lot more softer and gooier than the top, but the vital wheat gluten method seems to be quite consistent. Protein content, I mean, depending on the flour you're using, if you're using all-purpose flour, bread flour, or whole grain flour, you're going to get different ratios, but this will probably give you somewhere between 20 to 25 grams of protein per 100 grams, and then this will probably give you about 25 to 30 grams of protein per 100 grams. So this will be a bit higher protein content. So this will probably give you a better result for things like stews or braises. This will give you a better result for like deli slices, sausages, or grills. In terms of the flavor, both of them are going to absorb, they're both excellent in absorbing the flavors that they are simmered in or marinated in or cooked in. In terms of cost, this is probably cheaper because it's using all-purpose flour, and this is probably a bit more expensive because your vital wheat gluten is a more expensive ingredient. But then this, I used a smaller quantity, but it gave me the same ratio in the end. In terms of storing the seitan, you've got two ways of storing it. You either keep it in the broth in an airtight container in the fridge for about 5 days, 5 to 7, I think probably about 5 days, or you can wrap up the seitan and freeze it in a Ziploc, an airtight container or a Ziploc. You probably want to, depending on how you intend to use it, decide to either slice it or prepare it that way beforehand, or just freeze it as a piece and then defrost it and do what you need to do with it later on. And you can keep it in the freezer, I don't know, for weeks, for a few months. Wrap it up in cling film and Ziploc it in the freezer for up to 3 months. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. I really tried to talk about everything that there is, but if I've missed anything, please comment below, ask me your questions, and I'll try my best to answer you. And if you found this video helpful, please make sure to keep the energy flowing by subscribing to my channel so you can help me create that ripple effect so I can reach more people and continue to post videos every single day for you. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.